Bafana is the best national teams in Africa. While on that, there are so many things that are developing surrounding the Bafana squad. The number one issue is the Lorch exclusion to Bafana. Since Lorch has been producing a good performances for Iwedet Casablanca in Morocco. So everybody, the pundits, especially the journalists, are always probing the questions to the coach. Why the inclusion of Thembinkosi Lorch? Why the inclusion of the Thembinkosi Lorch? But we can't look at Lorch alone, because there are so many players also who are giving a great performances from their team level, but they are not within the national team setup. Shabalala is one of the Kaizer Chiefs players who's been consistent in giving good performances with Kaizer Chiefs. But also we have an excellent Skhwishi, like we call in errors. And Skhwishi is one of those players that probably in this channel was first picked off, because I'm a prowess as a coach. I also included Skhwishi, which is Undlovu, we call in errors. When you speak about your wing play, you cannot speak about the Betway Premiership without mentioning Skhwishi, like we call in arrows, because he's been excellent, he's been magnificent. And inclusion Bafana can aid a lot in terms of the attack Bafana, in terms of the offensive play Bafana, in terms of running behind a defensive opponent Bafana. But there are also a number of other players that are within the Bafana setup. We're speaking of Nkoto, we're speaking of Apolis, we're speaking of Urele, we're speaking of lately Umoremi, who's been included in that squad, but also they use Umorema as a winger. Now the inclusion of whether Skhwishi or Lorch actually could spark a debate, because these are two players who will give us something going forward as a national team, but both of them are different players altogether. If you aggressive Skhwishi, skill, jubane, technique, and he has goals in feet, is the same thing that Thembinkosi Lorch also has on the other hand, but at the same time, Lorch brings in experience. When you speak about high pressure games, he came to the highest level in terms of competition. If you put Lorch on that type of a game, he will always perform. He will always shine. We've seen him with the Orlando Pirates. We've seen him with AMA Cup finals back to back with Orlando Pirates. Not only that, we saw him in FIFA Club World Cup with Iwedat against Man City, against some of the best players in the world. Lorch has shined, but the age, to be specific, is not on his side. When we speak about building for the future, then Undlovu takes the cake, because Undlovu gives you the same aggression, gives you the same skill, gives you the same quality, but also his confidence on the player is also there. But the age also is on his side. In my opinion, when we bring in the conversation Lorch, we also need to bring in Skhwishi on the same line of breath, because these two players both also deserve a chance to be included in the national team. But the players that are there are also doing business. We qualified for the AFCON, for the World Cup, because of those players. We can't all of a sudden snap Burele, all of a sudden snap Apolis, all of a sudden snap the rest of the players that are there, just because now there are certain players that need to be included. If they are still performing and they are good, they have to be there in the national team. That means about Lorch, about Skhwishi, about Mdu, who else I'm forgetting. But those players that are being mentioned along the lines of being included to the national team, that means they have a challenge of performing week in, week out. Make sure that, because there's an entire year before the World Cup, to make sure that they are included to the final squad that's going to the World Cup. It speaks to them having the consistency from now on going forward. And Lorch has proven that he is a brand new resurrected player, and is bringing in those performances that he had against the Pirates. Going to AFCON, Angola, Egypt, I think Egypt knows Lorch. We even called him Moses, a South African, because what he did against against Egypt, it's unforgettable. Egypt, and he can still perform at that highest level now, despite what he is 32 years of age. But also in that, Lendo age, sometimes you need to look at it with a deeper eye, because if a player can still perform, we're looking at Skhwishi. He was 35, I think, in the last AFCON, but his performances, I think he was playing his best football at 34, 35 years of age, Skhwishi. So snapping out to Lorch with the saying that he is old, I think it's unfair a little bit. Maybe we could say that the players that are there currently in the national team are performing as well. So he needs to put on more performances to actually make sure that he actually comes in ahead of those players. We're looking at the Apollos, the game that he puts in for Pirates week in, week out. There's no way that any player will actually come and easily take away position from Apollos. That's one of the players that including that Thembinkosi, he has to be in the conversation. Also, Mahongkota, I think he is doing good South, and he was doing good also with Pirates. So these are the two players who are on the wing play, where Lorch edlala khona, where Skhwishi edlala khona. Despite Urele being there, but Urele can also play as a 10. That's another discussion, because Ku10 we have a player like Urele, who also can play as a wing. We have a player like Apollos, who also can play as a wing. We have Mbule, we have Tito. And at any given day, Skhwishi comes back into the field of play, he will be one of those players, number 10, who are available. And also can play as a 10 and also as a half winger. So these players who are giving you more options, I think Lorch is one of those players who can play in as a 10, as a second striker, and also as a winger. So if we speak about Urele, we speak about Apollos, we speak about Umtu and Lorch, those are typically the same player, but in terms of skill, they bring you something different, because each and every player is a complete player on his own. So Lorch brings in experience, and you cannot buy experience, and the class also is permanent. So maybe it is correct to bring Lorch into the conversation as far as Bafana is concerned, but there are also players that are within the squad that are very, very good and are performing week in, week out. But there are also players who are outside the squad. Bafana non-Dovla, Skhwishi with arrows, who also giving in those performances week in, week out within the arrows. And also Makhala, Kukun. So there's a lot of players, there's a number of players, a pool of players to select from when it comes to Bafana going to AFCON, and also next year. Maybe let's not mention the World Cup for now, because it's still a year to that, maybe 9 months to that. A lot can happen within 9 months, and a lot of changes can happen within 9 months. So every player that is outside the Bafana can still put on the work to make sure that they actually included to Bafana going to the World Cup. So we're speaking now specifically for the AFCON next month, in few weeks, basically, which I believe Bafana, the only acceptable result that they're going to perform, since they are the best side in Africa, is to win the AFCON. That's what they need to do, hands down, no excuses, win the AFCON. Then we talk about going to the World Cup after that one. This is Nevertheless Commentaries. We'll see you in the next one. Thank you. Oh, Namhlanje Bafana is playing in Zambia at 3. I'm sorry to the Zambians, but you guys not going to win this one. So I'm sorry to you, Zambians. Sorry.